Let calm have a chance. I'm Tonya Hall, and joining me is Jason Fried, author, founder, and CEO of Basecamp. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. So, for those people who haven't picked up one of your books or maybe haven't heard of your company, tell us a little bit about what Basecamp does and give us a brief rundown of the company's 20-year history.
Sure. So Basecamp's the name of the company and also the name of our main product, Basecamp. Basecamp's a project management tool. And we've been doing Basecamp since about 2004, and we're currently on a third major version of it. And the big deal with Basecamp is that Basecamp is a really kind of a one-stop shop, all-in-one tool that brings an entire project, an entire team together in one place, versus the way the industry is trending right now. People try to like hack together 4, 5, 6 separate products and try to make something work, but that just like ends up with a really scattered, like information scattered, the team scattered, the project scattered. It just doesn't really work. So Basecamp is sort of an all-in-one thing. So that's kind of what we're about. We also write books, which are more about the business side of things, like how we approach building a business, why we keep our business small intentionally, why we think 40 hours is enough work per week, not per day, per week. And we have, some pretty outspoken opinions about raising money in Silicon Valley and the toxicity of Silicon Valley and that sort of thing. So we've got that going on. As far as the history of the company, so we've been in business for 20 years. We've been profitable every year. And that's sort of a big part of our existence is actually running a solid, sound business and not just kind of losing a bunch of money forever and crossing our fingers and hoping one day we'll make some. But we've done a bunch of different things over the years, a bunch of different products. But about 5 years ago, we consolidated, just focused on Basecamp alone. And then we've continued to write books. And actually, we do have another product coming out soon, which we said we would never do. But we're going to launch another product either at the end of the year, this year or early next year. But that's sort of that's an extremely brief summary, but that's probably enough. Otherwise, I would take up all the time and
Well,
get
let's
into
have
too
time
much
to come
detail.
back and talk more about it, including your new product that you're launching at the end of the year.
Sure.
So, but let's talk about your latest book, which is why I brought you here. Your latest book is It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. So we always feel like it does, right? And you've written a half a dozen books or so by now. What motivated you to write this one?
Well, I talked to a lot of friends and just, when you talk to friends, you're like, hey, how's it going? What's up? What's new? Whatever. And you eventually kind of move your way into talking about work. It seems that's what Americans do. And that's what I was doing. And everyone was just saying, it's crazy at work. Like that's what everyone's response was. It's crazy at work. And you hear this enough. And I don't identify with that. There are moments when it's hectic, perhaps, or a little crazy, but the norm at Basecamp is not that. The norm is calm. And as I heard more and more people talk about why it's always crazy at work, and you ask them, well, what's crazy about it? They're like, well, I'm working 70 or 80-hour weeks. I'm answering emails on the weekends. I'm on call 24/7. My boss is sending me a note at 11 o'clock p.m. Like what is that's crazy. Like that doesn't have to be that way. And so we decided to take a step back and really sort of evaluate how we work and put that together in a book to show people that you can actually build a wonderful company that exists for a long, long periods of time, that's very profitable. And you can do it on 40 hours a week and 8-hour days. And you can do it without like running around with your hair on fire. And you can do it without demanding people get back to you at 10 o'clock at night. And you can do it by giving people 1 month sabbaticals every 3 years and extended vacations and working 4 days a week in the summer. And all these things that we do, which is very different than the rest of the industry. We wanted to put this in a book so we can get the word out. We put it in a blog post and put it in talks and whatnot, but a book has a way of solidifying the ideas and making it very shareable. And so that's what we did.
You say that one of the worst inventions in modern technology is the shared calendar. Why is
Yeah,
that?
horrible. Well, the shared calendar basically allows everybody to take each other's time. And all you've got during your day is your time to do your work. And one of the reasons people are working later and longer and more frequently is not because there's more work to do. It's because they don't have any time to do the work during the work day, because their work day has been sliced into a bunch of different little blocks, colored blocks. We call it calendar Tetris. You look at someone's calendar and there's like red block and blue block and green block, and everyone's time is just chunked up into these small 1-hour blocks. And it's because shared calendars allow you to see someone else's schedule and pick off time. And granted, you could say no to an invitation, but most people don't, because then they're not a team player and all the other bad things that happen when you say no to people at work. Ends up Most of your day is now dictated by what other people want you to do with it. And it's all initiated and enabled by shared calendars. So at Basecamp, nobody has a calendar that anybody else can see. So if I want to meet up with someone and talk to someone, I actually ask them. I just say, hey Ryan, like, are you free at 3:00 on Thursday to catch up about this idea? And he'll say yes, or he'll say no, and then we'll negotiate the time and the day and whatever, and we'll work it out. Versus like me being able to see his whole schedule and just like pick off that time. And some people will like, set aside blocks of time saying like, don't bother me during this time. But that just is emblematic of the problem. It just represents the fact that people have to then claim their day. Like, you should have your whole day to yourself every day, so you can get your work done and be done at like 5:00. So anyway, shared calendars enable this behavior, and I think they're really dangerous things. And so therefore we don't have any at Basecamp.
Basecamp employs roughly about 60 people, and you've been very successful, right? We all have seen that. But how do your ideas about work scale to organizations? How does it scale to those that are organizations that are an order of magnitude larger, enterprise
Yeah.
level?
Well, first off, I don't care is my first answer, because everyone's obsessed with the enterprise, but the enterprise there's hardly any of them. There's millions of small businesses and medium-sized businesses, and I'd much rather help them than help the enterprise companies. But that being said, these principles definitely apply, but they apply at different scales. So they don't apply necessarily to they could, but to the whole company, but it might be a team. So a specific team, maybe of 7 people or 12 people or 20 people, can implement some of these ideas, perhaps, if they have a little bit more autonomy in terms of their workspace and their environment and their requirements and whatnot. So I think that I would look at it in terms of how can these ideas apply to specific groups inside of an organization. And some organizations are just small enough that the whole organization can work this way. But others, it might just be groups within that organization. But fundamentally, like, I'm here to help the smaller company, the sustainable company, the mid-sized company that really wants to improve, that knows everybody's first names, that knows everybody's names, that really wants to make a better place for those kinds of groups. And while these ideas, again, may apply, they typically apply in smaller scales inside larger companies.
Why do you hesitate to offer advice to those who may be just starting their career, or even those starting a company? And can't we learn from those with much more experience?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because you must have seen me rant about this. I think that advice has a shelf life, and it expires pretty quickly, actually. And I'm the wrong person to talk to about starting a business. I started a business 20 years ago. Like, I don't remember. Do you remember what you were doing 20 years ago? Really, at like a molecular level, enough of a detailed level to really tell someone, like, or give someone really fair advice? No, you probably are making up your own myths, and you're probably recreating history, because that's just how our minds work. We don't really remember 20 years ago. And also, things change over time. So I think if you want to know what it's like to start a business or how to start a business, whatever, I'd go talk to someone who did that 6 months ago, even if they're struggling, because that's more realistic than where I'm at right now, which is 20 years in, comfortably running a good business. I don't have the same or the right degree of advice to give you, which is also why I don't think small businesses should ever look to, like, so what would Steve Jobs do? Or, what would Mark Zuckerberg do? Or what would Sheryl Sandberg, like, who cares? Like, they run organizations with tens of thousands of people. That has nothing to do with your 4 people. Like, it's the wrong scale of advice. Or like, how do they run their products, or how do they run their process? Like, what scale are we talking about here? Like, the way a large company works is not the way a small company works, and it shouldn't be. So I think whatever advice you're looking for from anybody, you want to find contextual, relevant advice. And that's typically, like, if you're thinking about how to do something, I'd look at other people around the same size. If you're looking at how to do something, I'd look at, who's doing it right now, or who recently did it versus who did it a long time ago. So I try to refrain from that kind of advice. I'm happy to give advice on how to, run a sustainable business, how to build a profitable business, how to do product design, how to market products, because that's stuff I do every day, how to hire, those kinds of things. But how to start, I have thoughts, but I would put very little weight on those, to be honest.
Your book is all about being more effective by being less busy. So who suffers more from the busy trap? Would it be the senior manager at a large enterprise, or the lone ranger trying to get ahead in a gig economy?
I'd say, well, I'll take the easy way out and say both. But let me. I actually think so. Managers typically, like at a manager level in a larger company, their job is to kind of be busy almost. That's kind of the job, like bouncing between meetings and help bouncing between people and whatever. So that's kind of how they fill their day anyway. But I think the problem is that a few notches down, the people who are actually doing the day-to-day work, if they're too busy with busy work, or they're being pulled apart, pulled aside constantly and having to attend this meeting or that meeting or this conference call or this video chat or whatever it might be all day long, they don't actually have the time to do the work that they're assigned to do. Managers, their work in many ways is to be bouncing around and training and teaching and seeing how things are going, whatever, and kind of setting direction. So that is kind of their work. So that's sort of the problem, is that the people at the top whose work it is to kind of be busy in a sense, although I don't really totally believe that, but in many organizations, that's a sense, they push that down to people down below who don't have the luxury of being able to be busy and also being able to deliver. So I think that the sort of the lower you are in an organization, the more precious actually your time should be treated, because you're the one who's doing the work on the ground, and you need the time, focus, and attention to do that. And you often need uninterrupted stretches of time to do that kind of work. So that's how I would kind of answer that. I think busy in general is a bit of a disease. I don't think there's really a lot of good reasons to be flat out busy, meaning your whole day scheduled, your whole day occupied. I know in some industries it's different. Of course, there's always exceptions, but I think most people's days are probably a little bit too rigid to begin with. And I think this comes back to the calendar thing, is that it's so easy to fall into a rigid format when the way your time is divvied up is very rigid by these 1 hour boxes. So anyway, that's sort of a long answer to that, but that's kind of my thought.
How do you maximize your results if you aren't obsessed with accomplishments? I think a good example of that would be like Gary Vaynerchuk, who says, go out and crush it. You know, you guys, as you've said, you only differ, I think you've told me it's like 5% and
Yeah.
what you each other believe. So where is that difference?
Well, first off, I don't personally believe in maximization. I'm not interested in maximizing anything. I'm interested in finding a sustainable pace. And I'm totally comfortable leaving things on the table, like leaving money on the table, leaving opportunities on the table. Like, it's okay. Like, I'm not going to do, my life is however long it's going to be. I'm not going to be able to do everything I want to ever do, like every day, and every day is not going to be amazing. It's like, you get by, you do the best you can. And hopefully you have time to do other things than just chase maximization. So I'm not into the maximization thing. And I don't know if Gary is either. I wouldn't put words in his mouth about that. I think where we differ though is the sort of, I mean, all you have to do is watch Gary's, YouTube channel. And it's like, he's on a flight every day. He's in meetings every day. He's working all the time. He's encouraging others to hustle and work all the time. And that to me is not, that's where we differ. Let's say, I don't think that's necessary, nor do I think it's actually productive. I think it's a good way to tire yourself out. It's a good way to burn yourself out. It's a good way to stay busy and actually not even look at what you're doing. But hey, as long as I'm doing something, as long as I'm on a plane, as long as I'm going to this conference, as long as I'm busy, as long as I'm like out of breath, as long as I'm on the phone, as long as I'm in a cab and not a cab, like, you can feel like you're making progress, but that could be a type of progress, but it's probably not the progress most people need to be making. Most people probably need to be focused. They need to shut down other externalities and like get focused in on the work they need to do. They need to solve a couple things a day, do a couple things a day, and not run around all over the place and work forever. And I also think perspective is incredibly important, which means you need to leave the thing you're doing and come back to it. You need to have other experiences and bring those back to the thing. There's nothing more valuable than the next morning. Like, a well-rested sleep is, of course, hugely important, but every morning you come back and you look at what you did yesterday, there's a real clarity there. And I think you can get that clarity more often if you leave your work alone for a while and come back later, versus being so obsessed and absorbed in it. The last thing I would say about that is that I think that, and this isn't a Gary thing, this is more of an American thing, this sense of what does success mean? And a lot of people think success means like counting money and being busy and having huge amounts of power and having massive egos. And I don't think that that's true. I think, to me, success is, do I want to do this again? Can I do the same thing I want to be doing? day in and day out, week after week, month after month, year after year, and not feel tired and not feel burned out. So that's my take on it.
Define what you mean by a calm organization, and what are the first steps in building one?
That's a good one. Calm basically to us means people have reasonable expectations. Actually, let me step back for a second. There's kind of two things that make an organization not calm. So I'll kind of answer it in that definition. One is like the pursuit of endless growth. If growth is the target, like massive rapid growth forever, 10x, 20x, 30x, whatever X you want to do, like it's very hard to be calm in an environment like that. So I think you have to initially slow down or come to terms with the fact that growth, endless growth, is probably unhealthy ultimately and also unsustainable. The other thing is distractions and interruptions. So most people are constantly being distracted by communication, by demands, by expectations they can't meet, by deadlines that are unreasonable, by people who are asking questions that they can figure out the answer themselves. And we're constantly being bombarded with interaction or disruptions and distractions, and most of these are notifications, that sort of. So I think you've got to begin to work in a way where you're not being blasted all day long, and the expectations are not of rapid growth. I think if you can get those two things out of the way, then you can begin to say, wow, I have time today to do my work. Like no one's breathing down my neck, no one's looking over my shoulder. I don't feel pressure pushing against me every moment of the day. And that's where calm begins, is feeling like no one's pushing you that hard all the time. Where you can actually take a breath, you can actually walk out and not have to tell somebody, you can actually take a walk and think about things. You actually have time to think. I mean, one of the things I'll often ask people when I go speak at conferences is like, when's the last time you had even a couple hours to yourself in a work day? Like, when have you had 2 hours to think ever at work? And most people are like, never. I haven't ever had 2 hours to myself in a given day. To me, that's tragic. And I don't think you can run a calm company if people don't have that kind of time to themselves to think. So it's a broad answer, but those are some of the things I think you need to get out of the way in order to let calm kind of have a chance.
I would totally agree. Let calm have a chance. Jason Fried, founder and CEO of Basecamp and author of It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. I would completely agree with that. If somebody wants to maybe get a copy of your book, Jason, or connect with you personally, how can they do that?
Well, the book you can get any bookstore you want. And you can get in touch with me usually on Twitter at Jason Fried, Fried. Another place you can go is actually, you can go listen to our podcast, which is contains a lot of these ideas in more detail. So that's at rework.fm. So rework.fm. And then if you can find my email address, I do get back to people, but I'm not going to give it out. But it's out there. So I usually will get back to everybody within a few days or a few weeks, depending on my schedule. But I will write you back.
Sounds good. Thanks again, Jason.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And you can find me right here or go to tonyahall.net. Thanks for watching.